The day I signed away 41 years of my life, my attorney looked like he was about to be sick. His hand trembled when he passed me the pen. My husband's lawyer was trying very hard not to smile, and I sat there, calm as a Sunday morning in June, and signed my name on every single page. Nobody in that conference room understood what I was doing. Not my husband, not his lawyer, not even the man sitting beside me who was supposed to be on my side. What none of them knew, what I couldn't tell a single soul, was that I had already won. They just didn't know it yet. I'm glad you're here with me today. Please stay until the end, because this story doesn't make sense without the ending. And if it moves you, let me know where in the world you're listening from. It means more than you might think. I was 67 years old when my marriage ended. 41 years. That's not just a number. That's the length of a whole other person's lifetime. My husband and I had built everything together from practically nothing. We started with a one-room office in a strip mall in Knoxville, Tennessee, a battered pickup truck, and a lawnmower that only started on the second pull. By the time it was over, we had a thriving property management and landscaping company with 14 employees, a client list that stretched across 3 counties, and a home in the hills that I had filled with 30 years of careful choices. The right curtains, the right paint colors, the right garden out back. His name was Harvey. He was 70 years old, and I had loved him since I was 26. The signs were there before I let myself see them. I think most women in my position know what I mean by that. You see something, and your mind explains it away, almost automatically, because the alternative is too enormous to look at directly. It started with his phone. Harvey had always been careless with it, left it on the kitchen counter, forgot it in the car, never gave it a second thought. Then suddenly it was always in his pocket. Always face down on the table. Password protected. He'd never had a password before in his life. Then came the late evenings. The landscaping business had seasons, and I knew those seasons better than he did, frankly. Spring and early summer, yes, those were long days. But October? November? There was no good reason to be driving back from a job site at 9 o'clock at night in November. When I mentioned it, he'd say something about meeting a client or inventory, and his eyes would slide past me to the television. I found the credit card statement by accident. He'd started handling the mail himself, which was already unlike him, but one afternoon a second envelope came in the same name. A card I didn't even know he had, and I opened it without thinking. 3 hotels in Nashville over 4 months. Restaurants I'd never been to. A jewelry store I didn't recognize. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time with that statement in my hands. I didn't say anything that night, or the night after. I needed to be sure before I opened that door, because I knew once I opened it, there was no going back through it. The proof I needed came on a Wednesday afternoon in late January. Harvey's truck was in the shop, so I was dropping some files by the office. Files he'd asked for, files I'd pulled from the cabinet at home, the way I'd done 100 times over the years. When I reached across to the glove compartment of his rental car to leave them where he'd see them, my hand found a card tucked behind the registration. A birthday card, pink envelope, sealed, with his name written on the front in rounded, careful handwriting. I don't know why I opened it. I think some part of me already knew. Happy birthday to the man who makes every day feel like something worth waking up for. You are my whole heart. Forever, Brooke. There was a lipstick print beside her name, red. I stared at it until my vision went blurry. Brooke. I knew exactly who Brooke was. She was 29 years old, 30 maybe, and Harvey had hired her 2 years ago as an office manager. I had met her once at the company Christmas party. Pretty girl, very pretty, the kind of pretty that feels calculated. I put the card back exactly where I found it. Then I drove home, and I sat in my garden for 2 hours in the cold, not feeling the cold, and I thought about what I was going to do next. That evening, I put the card on the dinner table between us. He stared at it. I watched the color drain from his face, and then slowly, something harder moved in behind the shock. It's not what you think, he started. Don't, I said, please don't do that to me. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he straightened his shoulders, and the man I had been married to for 41 years looked at me across the table and became a stranger. "I want a divorce," he said. "I've already spoken to someone." I don't remember exactly what I said. I remember asking about the business, about our home, about everything we had built. And I remember what he said back to me, in a voice I had never heard him use before, flat and certain and cold. "The company is in my name. The house is in my name. Has been for years. You haven't been officially involved in the business in over a decade, so don't expect a court to hand you half of something you didn't build." "I did build it," I said. "Harvey, I was there from the first day. You know I was." "Good luck proving that." He left that night, took a bag and his phone charger, and walked out the door. And I stood in our kitchen, my kitchen, and realized I didn't know what was going to happen to me. 3 weeks later, I sat across from my attorney in his office on the 4th floor of a building downtown. His name was Hector, and my daughter Janet had found him through a friend. He was methodical and thorough and kind, and when he looked up from the papers Harvey's lawyer had sent over, he looked genuinely pained. "This is not a fair offer," he said carefully. $40,000, your car, and whatever furniture you want to take. That's it. The business generates close to $400,000 a year in revenue, the property alone. What are my chances if we fight it? I asked. He took a breath. Honest answer? It's difficult. He structured everything strategically. You left the day-to-day operations 11 years ago, at his request, by the way, which matters, but proving it matters is another thing. It could be a long, expensive fight. And if I just sign? He looked at me the way you look at someone who has said something alarming. Mrs. I would strongly advise against that. Please think about what you'd be agreeing to. I'd like to see the documents, I said. He slid them across the desk. I read every page. I took my time, and when I reached for the pen, Hector put his hand flat on the table like he was going to stop me physically. Please, he said, at least take the weekend. I've made my decision, I told him. I signed every page. I watched Harvey's lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman who kept her face professionally neutral, gather the documents into a neat stack. She said they'd process everything by the end of the following week. Are you sure about this? Hector asked, one more time when we were alone. I looked at him and I almost told him. Almost. Instead I said, don't worry, I know exactly what I'm doing. I did not feel certain about that until I was sitting in my car in the parking garage, hands shaking so badly I couldn't get the key into the ignition for a full 5 minutes. What had I just done? I had signed away my home, my security, everything I had worked for since I was in my 20s. I made myself breathe, in through the nose, out through the mouth, the way my doctor had taught me years ago for anxiety. You saw it, I reminded myself. You know what you found. Now go find the rest of it. I drove to the small apartment I'd been renting since Harvey left. 1 bedroom, 2nd floor, a view of the parking lot, and a sliver of Tennessee sky. I made a pot of coffee I didn't drink, and I opened the 2 filing boxes I had brought from the house. The boxes Harvey hadn't noticed me take because he never once in 41 years paid attention to my filing system. That was his first mistake. I have always kept records. It's not a personality quirk so much as a survival habit I picked up from my mother, who kept every receipt, every letter, every document in labeled folders going back to 1962. I inherited her system and her discipline. Harvey used to tease me about it. You could find our electric bill from 1988 if someone asked you to. He wasn't wrong. I spent that entire night on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by paper. What I was looking for was the original LLC filing. I knew it existed. I had been there when we filed it in 1987, a Saturday morning, a notary's office on the other side of town. I could still remember the pen running out of ink halfway through the form, but Harvey had told me, and his lawyer had apparently told the court, that he was the sole owner, that he had built the business alone. I found the document at 2 a.m, inside a manila folder labeled Business, Formation, in my handwriting, in blue ballpoint. Knoxville Grounds and Property, LLC, established November 14, 1987. Members, Harvey W., Dorothy L. My name, right there, founding member, equal partner. My hands stopped shaking. There was more. There was so much more. Tax returns from 1987 through 2001 showing joint business income. A commercial insurance policy from 1993 naming me as co-owner. A letter Harvey had written to a major client in 1999 that said, "Please feel free to contact either myself or my business partner and wife. She handles client relations and will be happy to assist you." Printed emails from 2003 where he referred to me that way again, in writing, to a supplier we'd worked with for years. And then, the thing that made me sit very still for a very long time, I found the amendment filing from 2004. Harvey had restructured the LLC. He had removed my name from the ownership record and listed himself as sole member. I had signed something in 2004 related to the business, but I had been told it was a tax restructuring document, something about how we categorized income. I had trusted him. The next morning, I called a different attorney. I had done my research the night before. His name was Anton, and he had a reputation in Knoxville for being expensive, aggressive, and nearly impossible to beat. My son had mentioned him once, said a colleague's mother had used him in a custody fight and won something everyone said was unwinnable. When his assistant told me his calendar was full for 3 weeks, I said, "I have original LLC documents proving joint ownership of a property management company my husband claims he built alone. I signed a settlement yesterday, but the papers haven't been filed yet." There was a pause. "Can you be here at 1 o'clock? Anton had silver hair and the kind of focused stillness that made you feel like nothing in the room was wasted. He read through my documents without speaking for nearly an hour. I sat across from him and drank the glass of water his assistant brought me and waited. Finally, he set down the last page and looked at me. "Do you know what you've done?" My stomach dropped. Made a terrible mistake. "No." He leaned back. "You've handed yourself a complete case. You signed under duress, with counsel who was unaware of the full asset picture, based on your husband's fraudulent representation that he was the sole owner of a business you co-founded. And the papers haven't been filed, which means the clock hasn't started." He tapped the 1987 LLC document. This alone would have changed everything, but combined with the 2004 restructuring, which you signed under false pretenses, and these tax documents. He concealed marital assets, deliberately. That's fraud, not just negotiating tactics. He leaned forward. "Mrs., you haven't lost a thing. You set a trap, and he walked into it without knowing it was there. Now here's what we're going to do." For the first time in weeks, I felt something I had almost forgotten the texture of: hope. Anton moved fast. Within 2 days, he had filed a motion to set aside the settlement, duress, inadequate representation, fraudulent concealment of marital assets. He also filed for a forensic accounting of the business. The response from Harvey's side was immediate. Harv called me at 7:30 in the morning, 3 days later. "What do you think you're doing?" His voice was tight in a way I recognized. He was scared, and he was angry that he was scared. I thought we had an agreement. "We had a document," I said, "signed under false information." My new attorney explained the difference. "Margaret." He stopped himself. He'd called me by the wrong name. Some distant part of me registered that. "You need to stop this. You're going to embarrass yourself and drag the children into it." "You've already done that," I said. "You did that the moment you decided 41 years was worth $40,000. The business is mine. I built it." "We built it," I said, "and I have the original filing from 1987 to prove it." November 14th, Harvey. "Do you remember that morning? The notary's office ran out of ink halfway through. We had to borrow a pen from the receptionist. You remember that?" Silence. "Those papers don't." "I also have the emails," I said. "The ones where you call me your business partner. And I have someone going through 12 years of business accounts right now. I'm told that process is very thorough." He hung up. Anton called me an hour later. Harvey's attorney reached out. "They want to negotiate." Whatever they've been hiding, the forensic request scared them. The accounting took 3 weeks. When the report came back, I drove to Anton's office and sat across from him while he walked me through it. His expression was satisfied in a quiet, professional way. Over the past 4 years, he said, your husband diverted approximately $380,000 from business accounts to personal use, almost entirely related to his relationship with Ms. Brooke. He looked up. Did you know her last name? I shook my head. She's 31. She's been with him for approximately 2.5 years. He has been paying for her apartment in the Bearden neighborhood using business funds. Her car was purchased through the company. There are also significant charges at hotels and restaurants. He slid a summary page across the desk. He also filed fraudulent business valuations. He claimed the company was worth $900,000. Our analysis puts it between 2.6 and 2.9 million. I looked at the numbers. I felt a strange, cold calm. He used the business we built to pay for his other life. Yes, Anton said simply. What happens now? Now, he said, we go to court. Harvey tried twice more to settle before the trial date. The first time, through his attorney, $250,000, keep my car and the furniture. The second time, he showed up at my apartment on a Sunday evening with Brooke, which told me more about his judgment than anything else could have. I opened the door on the chain and looked at both of them. Brooke was pretty in person. Young in the way that feels like an accusation when you are 67 years old. She had the grace, at least, to look uncomfortable. Harvey spoke first. He wanted to apologize. He wanted to find a resolution that was fair to everyone. He had a new offer, $450,000, 2 years of rent paid, a clean end to everything. You used our business to pay for her apartment, I said, through the gap in the door. You removed my name from the ownership of a company I co-founded, and you offered me $40,000 for 41 years. I looked at him steadily. $450,000 is still an insult, Harvey. His jaw tightened. The apology was gone from his face now. You're going to regret dragging this into court. Everything comes out in a trial, things you won't want people to know. I've lived an honest life, I said. I'm not afraid of anyone finding that out. I looked at him for a long moment. Can you say the same? I closed the door. I stood in my small apartment and listened to my own heartbeat until I heard them leave. That night, both of my children called. My daughter Janet first, then my son. Harvey had reached out to them separately, had tried, apparently, to paint me as bitter and vindictive and irrational. What he hadn't counted on was that my children remembered. They remembered me at the office when they were small, filing papers, answering phones, meeting with clients. They remembered me doing the books at the kitchen table on Sunday evenings after dinner. We know what you did for that company, Mom, Janet told me. We were there. She also told me she'd run into one of our longest-standing employees, a man named Vern, who'd been with the company for 18 years, and he had said, without prompting, that if anyone needed a character witness for the business contributions, he'd be in that courtroom. 2 other former employees said the same. When I told Anton, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Good, we'll call them." The trial lasted 4 days. I won't give you every detail. That's more legal procedure than any of us need. But I'll tell you what mattered. Harvey testified that my role in the business had been minimal and had ended more than a decade ago. Anton's cross-examination took 40 minutes and consisted largely of handing Harvey documents he had written himself and asking him to read highlighted sections aloud. Letters to suppliers calling me his partner, a business proposal from 1996 listing us both as owners, an insurance application from 2001 with both our signatures. The forensic accountant was precise and devastating. $380,000 diverted. Business valued at $2.8 million, not the $900,000 Harvey had claimed. Vern testified. He said, Dorothy ran that office. She knew every client by name. She trained half the people who work there now. There wasn't a major business decision made in the first 20 years that she didn't have a hand in. He said it looking straight at the judge. The judge was a woman in her late 50s with reading glasses on a beaded chain and the kind of measured voice that made you feel like nothing in her courtroom was an accident. She listened to everything. She took notes. When she delivered her ruling, I sat very still beside Anton and kept my hands flat on the table. This court finds that Dorothy L. was a co-founder and equal partner in Knoxville Grounds and Property, LLC, she began. The original filing documents and contemporaneous business records establish this clearly. The 2004 restructuring, which the respondent signed under misrepresentation, is set aside as fraudulent. She went through each item. My share of the business, half of the true value, which she set at $2.7 million. That was $1.35 million. The diverted funds, $380,000, to be reimbursed to the marital estate and added to my settlement. The family home, valued at $650,000, awarded to me entirely as compensation for the concealment of assets. Legal fees, Anton's fees, which were significant, to be paid in full by Harvey. She looked at Harvey when she spoke next. The court is also forwarding all financial documentation to the IRS for review of the business accounts for the past 8 years. The evidence strongly suggests that the personal expenditures run through the business constitute unreported income, at minimum. Harvey's attorney started to object. The judge raised one hand. Additionally, she said, given the pattern of fraud, concealment, and deliberate misrepresentation. In this case, I am awarding the plaintiff 65% of total marital assets rather than the standard 50%. She looked at her notes. Total award to the plaintiff, approximately $2.4 million, plus full title to the family home. I heard Janet make a small sound behind me. Harvey sat very still. He looked like a man watching something fall that he couldn't stop. 2 weeks after the ruling, Anton called me with news. The business had 3 partners Harvey had brought on in 2018 to help fund an expansion. I had not known the full details of that arrangement until the forensic accounting revealed it. Those partners contacted Anton directly. They wanted to buy me out, $1.8 million cash, within 30 days. That's more than your appraised share, I said. They want Harvey out, Anton said. The IRS investigation, the press coverage, the reputational damage. They're done. Buying you out gives them the leverage to force him to sell his stake too. I thought about that for a moment. What happens to Harvey when they force him out? He'll have to liquidate his share at a discount, given the circumstances. Between what he owes you, the legal fees, and the tax penalties coming from the IRS review, he'll walk away with very little. Anton paused. Possibly nothing. Tell them I accept, I said. There was a long pause. You won completely, he said quietly. I want you to know that. I moved into my new home in April. It's a brick ranch house in a quiet neighborhood about 20 miles from where Harvey and I lived, and it cost me $320,000 cash, which felt like something close to a miracle. My daughter helped me paint the guest room. My son assembled the furniture. There's a small garden in the back, and I've already ordered the seeds for summer. 6 months after the trial, I ran into someone who used to work near Harvey's office. She told me, a little awkwardly, that Brooke had left him shortly after the ruling, that Harvey was renting a studio apartment near the airport and doing consulting work for a company he used to compete against, making a fraction of what he used to earn, that the IRS investigation had resulted in significant penalties. I thought I would feel something at that news. Satisfaction, maybe. Or sadness, some kind of emotional punctuation to the whole long story. I felt almost nothing, or maybe what I felt was so quiet it didn't have a name, just a settling, like a house after everyone has gone to bed. I've started volunteering twice a week at a legal aid center that helps women navigate divorce proceedings. I bring my filing experience, my knowledge of what records matter and where to find them. I bring what I learned the hard way about keeping documentation of your own contributions, every year, every decision, every role you played in building something together. I tell every woman I sit with, Do not let anyone convince you that your work doesn't count, because it isn't on a payroll. I was 67 years old when my husband tried to walk away with everything we had built together and leave me with the furniture. I'm 68 now. I've never been happier, and I mean that without any performance in it. Not because of the money, though I am grateful for the security. Not because Harvey lost, though I won't pretend there isn't a small, quiet part of me that thinks justice was served. But because I am living in a home that is mine in a life I chose, doing work that matters. He thought he knew what I would do. He thought 67 years old and 41 years of trust made me predictable, made me easy. He forgot that the same woman who kept every receipt and every document for 4 decades was also the woman who built that business with him from a pickup truck and a lawnmower. I was always paying attention. I was always keeping records. He just never thought to ask what I was keeping them for. What would you have done? Would you have fought back, or would you have taken the $40,000 and let it go? I'd genuinely love to know. And if this story reached you today, wherever you are, please share it. There's a woman somewhere who needs to hear it. It is never too late to stand up for what you built. Never.